we have Carl Benjamin, known as Sargon of Akkad, who really is one of the great podcasters and has been deplatformed a number of times. Carl, welcome on board.
Why have you so much for having me?
The fact you've been deplatformed means you're on the right side of history, hopefully. Tell us about that. Why?
The primary reason I get deplatformed, I think, stems from my effective political opposition to political correctness and postmodernism. I think that's fundamentally at the bottom of it. The people who are never going to accept the sort of progressive, politically correct worldview are the people who you find in the bad category. These are the people who get targeted by the institutions to varying degrees, depending on how big their infractions are. But the reason that you can tell that this is partisan is that people on the other side of the political aisle who do the same things don't suffer the same penalties. And it makes it very blatantly partisan. At this point, I think essentially any effective, what we'll just call conservative, which to just summarize is not progressive, voice will eventually be scrubbed from Silicon Valley platforms. I think it really began with the sort of the demonetization of Steven Crowder. That's when it really became obvious that if someone with such mainstream connections, I mean, he's had Ted Cruz on his podcast before. You know, he's a very famous man. He's got millions of subscribers. The conservative, he's very orthodox conservative, an American Republican, very orthodox in his beliefs. And if even he can be just arbitrarily demonetized because of someone's hurt feelings, it was done over mocking some guy's lisp and calling him gay, which the guy is gay. He calls himself gay. It's his Twitter handle, for Christ's sake. But, you know, calling him gay was enough to get Steven Crowder just demonetized. And that was the point where it became very obvious that this wasn't we're hunting Nazis. This was we're hunting right-wingers. And you're a right-winger. So that's the reason. Eventually, I think it'll end up probably splitting into two parallel political domains, where you have like Parler versus Twitter, you end up like BitChute versus YouTube, things like this, because the demand is there. Everyone, you know, there have been hundreds and hundreds of people who have just been deplatformed from dozens of different platforms now, and at no point did the demand for their content go away. It's just the access to it that was taken away. So I think that, and you can already see the beginning of these things building. Alex Jones is banned.video and Gavin McGuinness is censored.tv, and I'll be like creating a media website very, very soon, actually in the next few months. So hopefully you'll start seeing dissident content blooming on the internet. But already these are getting quite good views on their videos. So you can see the emergence of a sort of parallel industry coming about already. But that's not good. That kind of implies we're really on the road to civil war.
And polarization.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes, and it's specifically political from an ideology that demands that your personal interests are also your political interests. This is a very old left-wing, like radical left-wing catchphrase. The personal is political. It goes back to like the 60s with the original sort of second wave feminists and whatnot. And this is now all of life. You'll see that everything about you is a political statement.
So take us through that. Give us an example of that. Because I feel like I'm doomed on that basis.
It can literally be anything. For example, yesterday, the Conservative Home Secretary Priti Patel, she's got a reputation as being quite hard and quite conservative. And yesterday, she announced that they were going to be doing some kind of racial hiring in the UK, where they'll have positions open to non-white people only. And that's it. I mean, you can never escape being white. You can never escape being black or, you know, green or male or female, whatever these things are. And that's why traditionally liberal democracies operate along party politics, because party politics are the politics of self-association. You get to choose what party you join. You get to choose what you're going to support and therefore what you don't support. And the kind of race politics and identity politics that we're seeing taking over Western liberal democracies now, that's the end of that. There'll be a party for the white people, a party for the Muslims, a party for black people, and several parties might stack up, and effectively you can see that now in the Labour Party. The Labour Party is effectively the party of Islam and radical leftism, whereas and you see the voting blocks. It's something like 93% of Muslims vote for the Labour Party in Britain, and then conversely, 75% of Jews and like 80% of Hindus vote Conservative. So you can already
which is a recent thing. Which is a recent thing.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it is. It's in the last since the Brexit referendum, really, because I think that the election of Trump and the referendum on Brexit were not really just simple political events. I think what they were is deciding, are we going to become a purely Enlightenment country, or as in a construct of the Enlightenment, or are we going to have an ethnic component, right, that's based in an ethnic tradition? And Brexit and Trump are assertions that there is such a thing as the American people, not just an American. The American people is a group of people with a shared story, a shared culture, a shared ethos, a history, and it's a sense and an identity that ties someone to the local surroundings.
Can you reverse this? Can you reverse the identity policy, or is it impossible?
Yeah, no, yes, you can. Anything's possible, because ultimately all they've done is essentially redefined themselves into power. They've taken no fortresses, they've fought no battles. Everything that they've done can be reversed by just simply saying no. But the problem is the linguistic weaponry that they're wielding is very sophisticated, and it's very difficult to resist, because the ground was seeded in the 80s and 90s, where it was, and it is a core liberal value to which the whole point of it is to unlock a person's agency and to allow a person to succeed based on their hard work and willpower and determination. And so the point is to establish a fair set of rules that work in his favor, and therefore the favor of all of us, in order for people to be able to actualize and achieve. That's all still possible, but we're finding ourselves moving into a place where this is being denied based on these things. And I think we've just gone off the topic. So,
but
sorry, go on.
I could ask a question, and that is that the Tories are in power.
Yes.
With a massive majority. Brexit, which I voted for, went through. Trump, who's probably,
how are they failing?
In some way,
the question, isn't it?
Will they fail?
Yes.
Will they fail?
They've already failed. The Conservatives, I am shockingly disappointed. I would say the death of Roger Scruton is probably the end of the Conservative Party. Not the end of the Conservative Party. The end of the Conservative Party as a Conservative Party. They don't appear to have any particularly deep thoughts on politics and philosophy. I know this because Callum, one of my assistants, has kind of infiltrated the Conservative Party and had a Zoom call with Priti Patel the other day, and he got to ask her a question and listen to questions from other activists. And I'm kind of concerned at how shallow her thinking was. And I like I said, I quite liked Priti Patel until she started implementing racial quotas, which is exactly the left. I mean, it's like Jeremy Corbyn was the prime minister. That's his job. That's his decision. Like, as I was saying, a liberal democracy wouldn't ideally discriminate based on race and gender. And that's why racism was such an easy thing to overturn in people's minds. Yeah, of course it's bad to be a racist. And now we've redefined what the term racist means. Racism no longer is something that's inherent and something within an individual. That's the thing, the whole philosophy. Because I'm sure that you folks agree that racism is when you hold opinions about other people that are very derogatory, and therefore you're going to act in a very mean-spirited and cruel way to those people. And it's, and there is something about the sort of, the more nobler aspect of a person is to see men as your fellow brother. There is something spiritual and Christian into that. And I'm an atheist, but there is something kind of stirring and being like, yeah, we could have this idea of a brotherhood there. And so racism goes against the sort of Western British liberal temperament. And so it's so easy to overturn it. But now we've got to the point where racism doesn't even mean what happens in your head. Racism is the consequences of systems. And so all of these systems, and this, I'm actually working on a big script for white fragility at the moment. All of this is a best-selling book.
Robin DiAngelo.
Yes, Robin DiAngelo. Get it and read it. It's unbelievable. I'll probably write a conservative rebuttal to it at some point, a conservative's guide to it or something like that. Because
please send me a copy. There are many reasons why.
I'll be more than happy to, because this is such a slippery tome. It's dangerous, and that's the problem. And this is sold out. I had to get that secondhand. I couldn't get a new copy off Amazon to read it. It came out a few years ago, but because of all the Black Lives Matter protests and this is the final push of intersectional ideology, the radical left-wing ideology, to fully pacify our institutions. And they're doing a hell of a good job. You'll see all of them have got the pride flag, all of them putting Black Lives Matter up, while their activists run through the street and smash up buildings, businesses, burn things down, and nearly 30 people have died because of these riots. And some of them in just like open shootings in the street and things like this in the Chaz Autonomous Zone and places like this. And so people being burned alive, a body was found burned up in a building that was set on fire by the protesters. So the fact that they can then, with this, intimidate corporations into, and not just physically intimidate either, it's moral intimidation. And that's where cancel culture comes in. The whole point of cancel culture is moral intimidation. It is to show you, look, you stand to gain nothing by opposing us. You're going to lose everything. You may as well just say Black Lives Matter. You may as well just fly your rainbow flag, and maybe the mob won't smash up your shops. That's what the point is.
And they move at you one by one, where you stand alone, no one's standing beside you, no one's standing behind you, and they nail you. I mean, it's terrifying.
Twitter has allowed the weaponization of this. This probably wouldn't have been possible in the way that it's being done before social media, which is probably why you didn't see it. It would probably have required, weeks of congregations and churches to get enough people annoyed about one guy, something to get something done. But this can happen in, honestly, hours. In hours, you can find something that maybe you've said out of context, or maybe you said it years ago without thinking how offensive it might be, and things like this. Everything is taken as a political statement, because obviously everything is political. So if you've ever made a public statement, then that is a political assertion. It's not just your own musings. It's not just you being frustrated. No, that is a manifesto that you have laid out there as far as they're concerned. And that's why they'll hold up and say, well, look at this. It's never acceptable to say whatever this guy said. Therefore, cancel, cancel, cancel. And out of fear, everyone else goes along with it. How
do we turn this around? There must be a way. How do we get the boot off our face? Says Angie Diggle.
That's a hell of a good question, and I'm not sure I've got a perfect answer. It is going to require what I think it can be fair to be termed as heroism on our part. It requires us to support the people who are under attack. I'm pretty blanket at this point. Whenever someone's deplatformed, I'll just take a screenshot of it and then post it to my Parler account. Even if it's people I personally don't like like white nationalists or Alex Jones or whoever it is, it doesn't matter, because regardless, they're just people who are saying things on the internet like the rest of us. You can't be picky and choosy at this point, because that's the kind of divide and conquer mentality that they want and is allowing them to carry on. But basically, I think it's important to remember that these are a tiny fringe minority of people who have been vocalized by Twitter. We actually have the numbers. So in Britain, for example, less than 7% of women are feminists. And more, like 35% of women are anti-feminists, explicitly describe themselves being against feminism. So we are being tyrannized by a tiny aristocracy. It's just this tiny aristocracy has understood that we can use political correctness in order to persecute people, because everyone's afraid of it. What we essentially need to do, and this, it has to go to the top, right? Because it has to be the people at the top, and it's only the people at the top that are allowing this to happen. Because at any point, any business owner could, for example, Red Bull the other day fired their woke advisors. Excellent. Every single business defund this. This is a priestly class, right? Ask them, what are the metrics of success going to be? How will I know when you have done your job? Because at this point, we can sit there and look at every fucking company and go, no, it's sexist because there's sex inequality. No, there's racist because there's race inequality. How do we hold these czars accountable? How do we, okay, you're the diversity officer. Why is it wrong? Fix it now, get it done. but it will never be fixed because it's not something that's within their power to fix. It's all about like people's normal, natural cycles of life. But sorry, you wanted to say?
Well, no, I just think in the UK, you've got a Tory government that won by a landslide. Things may have moved around a bit. They've got a multicultural cabinet. You've got, you know, a dominant religion. You're an island. By the way, I've got a British passport, so
oh yeah, no, don't worry.
I'm one of you. I voted Brexit.
It's fine. You can criticize all you want.
Whereas, no, I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying the majority in the UK are probably are in agreement with you. The vast majority, I would say.
Yeah.
Whereas in America, that is causing the problem.
Yes, but not very large. In America, it's about, when polled, about 10% of people are like radical progressives. The sort of, you know, defund the police, ban ICE, open the borders, you know, it's only about 10% of the population. It's still a tiny fringe. The problem is the left doesn't understand that they are being used as useful idiots, like the liberal left, you know, the place where I thought I came from, you know, apparently I'm far right now, but like, I don't really think I've changed my politics much, and I still consider myself part of the sort of liberal left. It's just I understand that this is what communist subversion looks like. When a liberal can't stop waffling on about equality, you know you have been subverted by communists, because that was never the watchword of liberals. It was freedom. Freedom.
So J.K. Rowling's a good example.
Yes, yes,
isn't she? She's been eaten by her own side.
Yep, and look at the point where it came to, right? Because the thing you've got to remember is that this is not a physical war, it's an intellectual war, it's a definitional war. And it seems ridiculous to get into semantics all the time. But you've got to remember the way that they're winning, and they are at war with you, and the way they win their wars, they win their battles, is definitionally. It's by saying, well, I have a better definition of a concept than you do, and because you have not nearly spent as much time thinking about this as they have, because why would you, they can easily get you to a point where essentially you have to concede that you don't know the answer, and therefore you've lost the fight. And therefore people around will say, well, that person must be right, and therefore will do what they're asking because you must be wrong. So it requires you to have, this is probably why I'll write the reply to white fragility, so I can give people like good rebuttals to what's going on. Because the average person who's just, you imagine you're an accountant or something, you know, and you're like, okay, well, you've got a new diversity officer in, by the way, let us tell you about white privilege and white fragility and racism aversion and things like this. You'd be like, oh God, I don't know, I'm not a racist, you know. And it's totally understandable why these people didn't have the moral strength to stand up, because why would you think you need to, you know, you think you're doing good as well. But what this is an entirely new moral system. It's completely separate to the one we have. It's completely systemic, and it doesn't really care about the individual. So you can't really make any kind of individual defense of yourself, right? Because everything's political, and it's all politicized based on your arbitrary characteristics. And so everything is class-based. So you personally, I mean, this is why they don't care if someone's a murderer or something. If you would say, oh, trans rights, you know, they wouldn't care. Hitler could come back and say, oh, I'm pro-trans. And they'd be like, well, I mean, he's not that bad, is he? You know, he's not Donald Trump, you know? And so it really is like crazy how it's philosophically very, what you would call a priori, it all exists definitionally. So they seem to be following the sort of Kantian model of how to derive a good will. Can't believe that a perfectly good will had to be a will that was in the abstract. So definitionally, it would define itself into being good, and that would shine like a jewel, regardless of whether it ever accomplished anything good or bad. It doesn't matter. And that, to me, is it's a very continental way of looking at things from an English point of view. Sorry, yeah.
Carry on. English point of view. I want to hear the English point of view. Sorry.
Yeah, well, the English point of view is empiricism. We are not very abstract. The Cartesian idea of a kind of transcendental will is the sort of continental position, whereas the English empirical view is not very sophisticated, but obviously true. And it's obvious that we are fleshy bodies. You know, your brain generates your consciousness as a part of you. It's all material, and really, we should just get on with hoeing the garden. You know, and you know, don't worry about these crazy ideas, because they might end up doing something to a garden or something like that. But we're very empirical, and there's an obvious clash here. I feel like I'm talking a million miles a minute, because there's a lot to lay out, right?
But if we're the majority. The broad we. If we're the majority.
that was where I was going to get right.
Yeah.
So the problem is that everything is done via argument, and they have a form of argumentation that we are not ready for. And I don't think anyone could have seen it coming, so that people will say, "Oh, this comes from the Frankfurt School." Yes, it does, but that doesn't really matter, because the arguments kind of exist in potential anyway. The argument could have been made yesterday, and it would still be a valid argument from the position they're coming from. But essentially what this is the redefinition of things. And so reality obviously doesn't resemble an idealized definitional conception of what would be good. Reality is right in front of our faces, and often it's quite harsh. And we have to accept that we live in that. And that's, I think, where the drive away from what they're doing has to come from. But I'm not, like I said, I haven't figured it all out yet. When I do, I'll let you know. But that's the fact that we are physical beings existing in a physical world has to come to it. And this is where J.K. Rowling got to, because everything about J.K. Rowling was very progressive, very left-wing, until they got to the point where they were saying, well, listen, a woman is not an adult human female. It is any individual who identifies as a woman. So there is no objective criteria to identify what a woman is. Now, as I was saying, like, the English-speaking people, very empiricists, are saying, no, we can objectively identify a woman regardless of whether that thing believes it's a woman or not.
Or gender.
Exactly. And so J.K. Rowling has found herself, again, the Americans are very confused as to why there are so many TERFs or anti-trans feminists in England. It's because we're essentialists. We believe, we exist, we're physical things, and that has an effect on the world. And so J.K. Rowling has found herself forced to defend the concept of being a woman, which is wild if you think about it. Like, if I was attacking your worldview, like, how far would it have to get before I'm like, are you even male? Do you even believe in chromosomes? You'd be like, Christ, that's the core of what you are as a person.
Be laughed out of the room, out of the bar.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
a normal time. But again, it all stems from their ability to recontextualize what you think you know by redefining the words that you're using. None of the words that they're using are the same as the words you're using. For example, if you say white supremacy, you're probably thinking Ku Klux Klan. You're thinking people who lynch black people, things like this, or as you would. They mean the judges. They mean anything created by
white privilege.
So essentially the English constitutional heritage that the Anglo-speaking world has, that's all white supremacy, because it was created by white people, even though race obviously wasn't a factor in any of this. It doesn't play into it at all. But they consider it, because it was created by white people, therefore it's white. And that is, I mean, the first thing people normally respond to is like, oh, that seems really racist to think that they can't have law and order. And it's like, well, some cultures don't value law and order. Some cultures actually don't value, like, individuality or property rights or anything like that. And the position that the postmodernists begin with, and you can read a book called Towards a Political Philosophy of Race by Falguni Sheth. The way that they approach this is, if you were sitting down to play a game of chess, you would be like, right, am I the black pieces or the white pieces? Well, they approach it from the position where they say, right, okay, I'll play as the chessboard. And you think, what? That's a weird position. It's like, yeah, so the chessboard doesn't really care who wins or loses. It just wants things to work in a certain way. You've got to follow the rules. And so they don't care if if one side is crushed utterly, as long as there's no objection to the system, Okay,
and but so let me ask you.
Sorry.
Let me throw something in here. They're a minority of a minority.
Yes.
Even in America.
Everyone.
The majority do think they're crazy, do think this discussion we have is completely mad. You can't be the chessboard. You've got to be black or white.
Yeah.
And businesses ultimately have the money and have the power.
Yes.
So at what point do people go, out of here, this is bullshit, draw the line?
It requires,
I would think, relatively soon.
I would hope it would be relatively soon. With, as Red Bull as the example, I hope that other business owners who are not crazy and who are not congenitally terrified understand that this is not going away, and they want everything. And the only way that you can resist it is simply by saying no. Don't fund it. Don't. When their activists say, "Can we come over and give you, a lecture about diversity?" You say no. I don't need a lecture about diversity.
How are they funded? How are they funded? Ross Gregory says these lefties are well funded. Who's funding them? Are they well funded?
Well, I hate to say George Soros, but it is actually George Soros. His Open Society Foundation in 2016 gave Black Lives Matter $100 million. And then from the George Floyd death, Black Lives Matter, the organization, raised another $500 million. And that's just Black Lives Matter. And then you get places like the ADL and those sort of, the alphabet offense lobbies that get money from people. Honestly, it kind of looks like a racket. There are people who are afraid and donate money to these institutions in order to make sure that these institutions don't go hard against them for things they may have said on Twitter or in the past or something like this. And it seems that there's a huge ecosphere of a huge economy of this going on, and this goes everywhere. I mean, you can see money going through the Democratic Party and Joe Biden's campaign to Black Lives Matter and things like this. So it's very, very complex, and it's very, very well funded. And if there's anything like that on the right wing, I don't see a penny of it. I would love to see where the right wing is spending its money. But the businesses have to simply say no to all of this. They just have to resist. They can resist. You will be shamed. You will be called all sorts of words, but none of those words mean what you think they mean, and that's why they use those words. They're doing this on purpose. They're doing this as a form of political terrorism. They are taking territory, and they view your companies as territory. This is a war, and they're playing to win, and they're doing a bloody good job of it.
But who's our flag bearer? Who's our flag bearer?
Trump, without a doubt. Trump.
Okay, so let's talk about Trump.
Gets it. Yeah, he completely gets it. Right. Okay. So Trump.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. So the question is: do we want our civilizations to look like the progressives' view of the communist utopia, or do we want them to be patriotic Western countries? And Trump is probably the most perfect avatar of America that could be chosen. If you were to think of what does an American look like, it'd probably be this big, fat, orange-faced American billionaire who's just bullshitting everyone all the time. I'm the best at this. Everyone thinks so. And this parade.
Like Monty Python skit.
Yeah, it's like the emperor with no clothes, honestly. But he's bullshitted his way to becoming a billionaire and the president of the United States. But it's not any. Again, in many ways, the Trump supporters mirror the communists in the fact that they actually don't care. Like when Trump said, I could shoot a guy on First Avenue and they'd vote for me. That's totally true, because it's what Trump is openly representing that is what they're voting for. And it was the same with Boris Johnson and the north of England voting for Boris.
Right.
Because Jeremy Corbyn is representing a kind of techno-futuristic, communist, continental view of the world.
Wish-wash,
yeah, something that's very abstract, but it's definitely going to involve a lot of government interference in your life. And they're going to be all over your ass. And so there's no patriotism in it because it's entirely materialistic. The Enlightenment has decided that only reason exists, and that you can't have a kind of emotional connection to things like your culture or the community that you come from in a local sense. You have to have an emotional affinity with only things that are material, as in your skin color or something like that. Not a concept of, say, England, and so that lack of understanding of what I guess we'll just term the spiritual dimension of a human being, although it doesn't necessarily mean religious or anything like that. But the kind of the bit that gets you missed the eye and go, no, there's an ideal here. There is something higher here. That is something that they can't understand and can't accept. And then they use critical theory in order to pick apart your lack of knowledge and deep lack of knowledge on whatever the subject is. So anything that you say, a normal person isn't going to challenge it too much because they get what you mean. But if you're going to be cynical and kind of bitter about it, you'd say, well, answer the question, and then you say, see, there's nothing there, as if that is valid in any way, shape, or form.
So what happens? Trump gets elected.
Yeah.
Trump doesn't get elected? Give us the scenarios of, because we're living on the edge of a continent, and I guess we're going to have to go to learn anyway. So
yeah. So the Republicans in America are a lot more are actually conservative. The conservatives in Britain are not conservative, and those of them that are conservative are a tiny minority, a fringe of the Conservative Party, and it's insufferable. The government itself and the elected offices are very useful and powerful positions, but the whole point of liberal democracy, and I guess in this way we kind of made a rod for our own back, was we didn't want to be tyrannized by the officials, so we wanted limited government and dispersion of power. And that means that there's a lot of power that can be accrued in society that doesn't require any kind of election. It's just free agents operating in a free society. And so the left has done very badly in electoral politics, consistently, in fact. They're getting crushed because, like you say, the majority of people don't want this nonsense. But they're very, very good at dominating society, because these are they control academia, they control the media, they control Hollywood and the movie and TV industry, so the entertainment industry.
And in America, majority of the media,
completely.
CBC,
In America, you've only got Fox News, really,
right,
that resists it. Over here, we've got nothing. We've got no right wing outlets or anything like this. Nothing that. And the test is: will they be politically correct or won't they be politically correct? If they won't be politically correct, then you have genuine conservative thoughts. If they will be politically correct at all times, then you don't. For example, I mean, there's no way on the BBC or any other station here you can have Ben Shapiro on and go, trans women aren't women, trans women are men, and I'm going to call you a he. That would be like, it'd be a meltdown.
Wouldn't happen. Yeah,
it wouldn't happen. But that can happen on Fox News because it's a silly thing to be contentious over, isn't it? So the elected positions, very useful to have, but the problem is that the media and the entertainment landscape is dominated by left-wing thoughts, because they have been very aware that they can act as a gang if they all preach the same mantra effectively. So you'll hear the same things: Black Lives Matter, trans women are women. You've got certain phrases, and these are shibboleths. You say them to get allowed into the club. You're allowed into the gang. You are one of us now. You're not one of them. You're one of us, because you believe trans women are women. And it's very culty in that way, in fact. And so I think that essentially there's not really going to be any retrieving most of these institutions. Thankfully, most of them are private, so they can just die on their own, like The Guardian is doing. And you've seen all the media downsizing, hundreds and hundreds. In fact, it was 11,000 jobs that have been cut in the past couple of years. I saw the stat the other day from the media. And it's mostly left-wing media. I mean, Tucker Carlson's getting record ratings because he's saying sensible things. And the media bubble was created through an inflation of left-wing cash. It was George Soros money about 10 years ago now. They realized, oh God, online's quite taking off. Here, have lots of money. And then places like Vox, Vice, all these, you name a bunch, Salon, whoever. They all blew up because they were given loads of money, but they're failing because they're not sustainable, because they don't have a big enough demographic to appeal to. They're all competing very, very aggressively for a very small slice of the population. But I don't see how right-wingers can get these people out of these spaces otherwise. I mean, I don't see what the right wing could do to take Hollywood, because no right-winger is going to be chosen for a job. He's not going to be given the project. It's all going to be left-wing people.
Ricky Gervais did a hell of a job. I mean,
and he's
flying
not
the flag
right-wing.
there. No, he's not. So education, Hollywood,
yes,
journalism,
yep.
On the left side, but you've got the rest of society, middle, and then call it the right.
What is the rest of society that we're talking about? That's the problem, because these instruments set the thinking of the young people. They set the thinking of the politicians, and they set the thinking of the, and I'm not trying to be insulting, but there are lots of stupid people in society. More than, half the people are below average intelligence, and if someone comes up to you and gives you a bunch of gobbledygook about privilege and all this, and you're some guy who's like 90 IQ, you work with your hands, what the fuck are you going to say? What are you going to say? You're going to go along with anything that they say because you've got no argument. You don't know what the hell's going on. And so but you're going to get in a lot of trouble if you say, no, that's
correct.
Wrong. And so you just think, okay, well, this is above my pay grade, and you get on with it. So this isn't
or you avoid it. Or you
exactly,
avoid it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You avoid it, or you just comply where you're forced to comply. And so this is how you get people who don't like the way they're being treated, but go along with it anyway, because it's above their station. They're afraid. And so this
Pain
is how,
avoidance.
yeah, exactly, absolutely. And so civil society is essentially dominated by this. And I know this because I get people who will come up to. I mean, I was on a guided tour of the Houses of Parliament, and we were walking around, and one of the guards recognized who I was, and they're not supposed to say anything or interact with you. But everyone was wandering around. I was just looking at the painting. He came up to me and said, "I'm a very big fan. I shouldn't say anything." And I'm sort of like, I'm a socialist lefty, but I'm a very big fan of what you're doing with those woke chaps. And then and so they have to go along with it, but they know that it's wrong. And
too scared.
People have got livelihoods. They've got lives. It's a terrifying situation that they've come into. And there was the survey done recently where it turned out that 62% of Americans are afraid of speaking their mind. Now, 62%.
I saw that. Yeah,
62% afraid of they've got a First Amendment. They're the land of the free. They're the freest country on earth. They can say anything they want. The government can do nothing. And yet most of them live in fear for saying the wrong thing.
But remember that, I think it was in Harper's, 160 sort of wimpy lefties decided to stand up and sign including J.K. Rowling, sign that letter. So it has to, the left's going to eat itself, in my view. It's going to be a small minority and it'll eat its own tail.
Yes.
But no one on our side is standing up other than you guys, Dave Rubin, Milo, Jordan Peterson. Does the left have an equivalent of you guys, you podcasters?
Who
are they?
Right.
Not Russell Brand.
No, we don't have right-wing equivalents of Russell Brand. We're not allowed to.
True.
These people are deplatformed. Like I've met a bunch of comedians who I guess we'll just call right-wing comedians because they oppose wokeness, and there's a chap called Andrew Lawrence who he used to be on like Live at the Apollo and stuff like this. Big BBC comedians, and now he does small town tours because he said, look, I hate this woke stuff. I'm not going to do it. And so every time he's in Swindon, me and my wife make a point of going down just to show him some support. And he is funny as well. But they get deplatformed. The powers that be deplatform them because
there are no left-wing humorists, are there?
No.
They can't do comedy, can they?
No. They can only punch down, which is apparently not what comedy is for, because they're the ones in control. But yeah, so it essentially requires you to simply refuse, right? And that means that more pressure will come, because as soon as you are a non-compliant point, then essentially what you're doing is setting yourself up, or you're setting yourself on fire like a beacon for every other leftist organization to come out and say, I can look good in the eyes of the rest of the mob
by outlefting you.
That's exactly it. And so when they come, all you have to do is just keep saying no, and they can cancel whatever periphery things that are attached to your organizations, they'll try and cancel, but there's doubtless going to be replacements that you can use who don't give it down. So but you have to hold the line. That's just it. You just have to say no, and I don't care what you do to me. And eventually they'll realize they can't really do that much, unless they can somehow get you turfed out of your building and contracts and whatnot, but it'll turn out to be they can't do that much because the institutions are what they're using against the individuals, but they haven't really got much leverage over the institutions, because this is not going to affect your bottom line. Like, no one is going to stop going to your business because you didn't put up a gay pride flag. You just stay silent on the subject and carry on.
I've stopped using Gillette. I'm not using Gillette again.
Same here, actually.
Not that I get much fuzz.
I'm currently drinking Cornish tea rather than Yorkshire tea, and because I love this Yorkshire tea. It's the best blend. but they came out and were pro, pro Black Lives Matter. But they came out in a statement that suggested that you were a bad person if you didn't support Black Lives Matter. As in, they'd framed it like, you can drink our tea without feeling guilty. And I'm like,
stop
imagine
it. Yeah.
I'm not gonna feel guilty about drinking tea, But yeah, so
there'll be more Red Bulls, won't there? There'll be more companies like Red Bull just saying, fuck it.
They will. Because I mean, these people cost you a huge amount of money anyway, right? They cost you a massive amount of money over a problem that doesn't really exist, because they've redefined words to mean something that they don't, and they enforce this in the same way that Islam enforces its own anti-apostasy laws, right? They give you as much of a digital death sentence as they can, which is why I'm so proud to still be on YouTube, to be honest. It's nice that we're still in the belly of the beast. But
do you tread carefully? Do you tread
carefully? Very
Very carefully.
carefully.
You do, okay.
Oh yeah.
And do you know the parameters?
Yes. Anything that starts to get a bit spicy could be the end of it. So right. I'll just be quiet. But the point is, they're going to come for you hard, and you need to sidestep the allegations when they do. They'll come for you with a bunch of allegations, and you sidestep, and what you have to do is reframe what's being said. So when they say you're a racist, you say, well, actually, we are concerned about building a world where we don't have overt racial discrimination, and therefore we can't hire using skin color as a metric, because that goes against our fundamental principles. And that then the onus is placed back onto that. Why do you want to hire based on skin color? And then they reveal themselves to be the thing that they really are, which is actually white supremacists with a guilty conscience. They feel bad that white people won the great game of empire, and it's like, well, sorry, I mean, if you know anything about history, you'll know that the average conqueror in history would have been a swarthy man from the steppes of Central Asia. So to suggest that white people are somehow unique about empire and conquest or anything like that is nonsense. And that is an ahistorical sort of, and it genuinely is sort of white supremacist views. And white people were noble and were destined to conquer the inferior browns is not my opinion. That's it was just the turn of Europe after millennia of empires back and forth and across the known world. Suddenly Europe does it, and now you can't have that. Get out. We're all in the same boat here. We're all the same sort of people.
So what happens? Let's say Trump does not win. Right. Biden wins. Okay. Do the crazies of Antifa then calm down and everything's okay, or did they just push it to the next level?
No, they hate Biden too. Biden is just not Trump. That's the only. Biden is essentially a vacuous, empty shell. And there was even a New York Times op-ed that basically said along the lines of, look, Biden, we just need you to exist. We don't need you to do anything.
Right.
Just be the name on the ballot so we can say not Trump. And it's to their advantage that Biden doesn't have any strongly held convictions. If Biden was like a Tulsi Gabbard, they'd have many more problems with him, and they'd be a lot more vocal against him, because Tulsi Gabbard would probably push back against all of this gender and race nonsense. I mean, I've seen her do it on like the Joe Rogan podcast and stuff like this. So, that if she won the nomination, they'd be freaking out and saying, well, hang on a second, she's basically the same as Donald Trump. She loves America. America's evil, because that's obviously their worldview. And so Joe Biden is not a patriot. He doesn't care. He's a neoliberal sellout. He's happy to take money from China. He's been promoting China. He's happy to take money from Ukraine. He's got his fingers on the pies. He's exactly the same as the Bush era neocons, right? He's exactly the same kind of philosophy, as in the corporate takeover of America has been completed, and the peasants will just sit there and consume. We'll get filthy rich, and we'll control the world. And is it inevitable that Biden would have a multicultural, multi-diversity, cabinet? Is it inevitable that the vice president is going to be the power at hand? Yes, for a Biden presidency, I think so.
Yeah.
I can't imagine Biden is compos mentis enough to be able to do what to handle
to last the distance.
Yeah, I can't imagine for a second. I mean, I can't even finish a speech, without saying something ridiculous and making himself look like he's about to fall asleep. And he's 78 or something. He's 75 or whatever it is. He should have been retired.
He's losing it.
Exactly. Trump likes fighting, so you can see the vitality in Trump. He still likes the fight.
Can Trump win it?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the polls are being not well managed, and I think the same phenomena happened in 2016. I don't think they poll very well with consideration for the Electoral College. And what I actually think might happen is a similar sort of thing as the Conservative victory over Jeremy Corbyn, where the left had talked itself up and saying, we're going to win this, we're going to win this. And then it's a landslide defeat. And I think the same could happen, because you can't lay any of this civil unrest, any of this communist subversion, any of this race hatred at the feet of Donald Trump.
You
It's
really
not
cannot.
his fault. You know, he's just the guy saying, I think all that's bad. And so Donald Trump hugging an American flag, it looks stupid until you realize, Christ, what's he saying? You know, he's prepared to make himself look like a fool, but hug this goddamn flag and what it stands for, in the face of a bunch of black mask communists and race warriors saying, fuck white people, we're going to burn down this courthouse and things like this. Like,
needs to happen? What needs to happen, or what does he need to do between now and November to win?
The problem
do you
is,
have
the problem is he can't do that much. That's the problem. And it's the same with our government over here. We can't just legislate social justice away, because it's kind of an organic phenomenon. It was crafted in, academia by very intelligent people, some of the most intelligent people I would estimate to have ever lived, to be honest. But then it gets distilled down into the culture, and it's been educated into the minds of the young people. And so now it's organic, and you can see how they all, it's like, if you had like, I don't know, dominoes, and they all slap, and they all, suddenly they're all in a line, and they're all in agreement on a particular thing, on a particular subject. And it's weird to see. And you'll see, publications pumping out the same article one after another on the same day. And you think, Christ, is this conspiracy? And it's not. They don't need to conspire. That's a signal to the group. And they see someone moving, they see the reason for them, and go, yep, got him. That's a racist. We'll do ours. And then it's like a pack of wolves. It doesn't necessarily need direction. It has to be resisted socially, because we need to have right-wing politicians, and any amount of defunding, any amount of government money that goes to these things, right-wing politicians should just evaporate, gone. That's probably stuff that Donald Trump can executive order distances, subsidies for left-wing projects and stuff like this, and he should do, and he should be very aggressive about that. Businesses as well, when you give donations to charities, be very, very vigilant on this issue. But the problem is, it is a social movement, and it doesn't require governmental force to become power in society. It's not something that I think liberal democracy was prepared for, but I think if you think back on it, really, it was kind of inevitable something like this would happen. If you've got a bunch of really intelligent people thinking, how can we manipulate society? You've got a distinct separation between the state and society, and the state is actually very well controlled in a constitutional republic. You think, well, okay, well, we'll just operate freely. We can just essentially be like the wolves. So what it requires is, I hate to use this word because it's a communist word, but a form of solidarity, and networking is what they're very good at, and we should become very good at it too, because it's the only way, I think, to resist it. It reminds me very much of Napoleon's invasion of Germany and the German nobility. I can't remember the guy's name now, but he was saying, well, look, I need a citizen army like Napoleon has, because 40,000 lives a month, and any other army spends 40,000 lives a month loses.
Von Rundstedt.
So was that?
I thought it was von Rundstedt.
Oh, it probably was. I honestly can't remember. It was years ago that I was reading this, but it sprung back, because that really seems to be the way that it is. It's like, it's a new form of technology for warfare, and we have to adapt and be aware of this. And if we can't formulate a new way of countering it, then we have at least got to match it and mirror it to protect ourselves from it. It's sad to say, because I realize that's not something that's natural to conservatives. The idea of live and let live is very, very, it's the most noble aspect of conservatism. It's let me grill, I wish that we could be like that. I wish we could just leave them alone, but they're never going to leave you alone. So you've got to prepare yourself, and you have to actively do what Red Bull have done and be like, no, this has all got to go. We're not going to.
There'll be more Red Bulls. There'll be more Red Bulls. Yeah,
I hope so. It's the only way it can be done. It's the only way it can be done. And there will be revolution if not. If we don't get rid of this, there will be revolution.
Like revolution.
There's already guns and people dying in the streets in Portland now. It's already happening. The trick is make sure that you know who your friends are and know who's not going to become one of these
So
people.
does Donald Trump need to stand up and be tough and strong, prove that
He is.
you know?
He is.
Yeah.
His Mount Rushmore speech was, I mean, if I had written the speech, I wouldn't have added anything to it. It was word for word exactly what I wanted to
On the
hear.
money.
It was every word a symphony. You know, it's like an entire chorus within each syllable, because the average conservative, I think, would have just looked at the actions of the rioters and said, it's wrong to burn buildings. It's wrong. Okay, yeah, fine. You know, my son can say that, you know, but Trump put forward the moral case for America, and he addressed the ideology that's driving it. And he's been very firm on this. And so, and it was honestly a brilliant speech. It was a really brilliant speech. It deserves a better orator than Donald Trump to deliver it, to be honest. But it was exactly on the money. So at least we know the Trump administration gets the culture war. The conservatives in Britain have no idea. They are, I mean, you'd think after all this time of being whipped by the media, that they would have understood that the media is actually out to get them and trying to destroy them. But they still act as if the media is impartial and, you know, somehow a sort of an ally to politics, and it's not. It's an ally to left-wing politics.
So who are the Tories right now? Who are the Tories under Boris Johnson? I mean, you would think a man like that, of reading, of being editor of the Spectator, of any classical conservative background, and yet he's nothing at the moment. He's sort of a liberal.
No, he's very, very left-wing, to be honest.
In the true sense, in the
no, I mean, he's not going to start
sense?
saying he's the means of production or anything, but
yeah.
he's not. No, but like he's a very soft social liberal. So he thinks, oh, if people want handouts, I could give them handouts. I'd be happy to do that, And we need more money for the NHS. It's the guiding star of our country. We'll pledge allegiance to the holy NHS. I'm not even against the idea of the NHS. I'm just sick of the way it's being deified. But yeah, no, the Conservatives, I'm not impressed with that at all. And the only Conservative I've seen any hints of stirring of kind of awakening in have been Dominic Raab. But even then, like, he will say and stand by his position that he's against the idea, against modern sort of communist feminism. He doesn't want to take the knee for Black Lives Matter, but he doesn't put forward a forceful case as to why not, right? He doesn't actually do a very good job of persuading people that actually you shouldn't be taking a knee at all, because I mean, he said in an interview on Talk Radio that he was again, he seemed really baffled, like he's new to politics, like this was his first day in politics. He was like, well, I don't know. I think it'd be wrong. I only take a knee for my wife and for God, or the Queen, sorry. And but that's right. That's right. There's, build on that, Dominic. You can build this up. Yes, exactly. Because taking a knee shows who's your sovereign, and sorry, my sovereign is the Queen, not black people, things like, and therefore that's why it's got significance for your wife, blah, blah, blah. He could have built on this and really started making the moral case against getting on your goddamn knee because of something that happened 1,000 miles away in America.
100% right.
But he didn't. But he just was like, well, I'm not going to do it. I'll be left alone. No, dude, you're not going to be left alone. But the Conservative Party are just deeply and woefully uneducated about the philosophies that they're dealing with, and it's actually really shocking. You would think that and it's because they've deeply pragmatic, self-serving instinct for self-preservation. You would think
political survival.
Yes, okay. They will just become whatever essentially the left wing demands of them. And as soon, let's say we defeated the leftist ideology tomorrow and we got to be patriots again. It's like, okay, what are we going to do? We'll end immigration. And if all the press were saying, yeah, why the hell is Boris Johnson just letting 600,000 people a year come to Britain? We're a tiny island, blah, blah. Then they'd do it like that. They'd do it overnight. They'd be, oh, good, okay, if we're allowed to do that then. And it's like, dude, stop letting the press drive the country. You got elected. Make them howl. Make them scream,
300,000 UK passport holders in South Africa.
Sorry,
and I think there are 300,000 UK passports. Can't be a bad thing. I want to ask, I want to talk about just one last topic on feminism. Mm-hmm. But before we do it, is there hope? I mean, everyone's feeling a bit depressed about where the world is heading. We've got China on the rise. We've got Russia playing games. We've got, Europe weak as hell as usual. Britain standalone, and the US imploding culturally. Is there hope, or are we lost cause?
If
We
there
the
was
good
no
guys.
hope, if there was no hope, their propaganda wouldn't be necessary. They wouldn't need to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars, and they wouldn't need to deplatform us. They wouldn't need to patrol our every action and every thought if there was hope. Because what they're trying to impose is actually a very fragile worldview. It doesn't take much more than you speaking out of turn to actually destroy it. Actually, I think that trans women and men, because they've got dicks, boom, that's the entire thing up in flames. So they have to treat each infraction as if it's potentially lethal, as if it's fatal to their cause, because it is. And the first person that gets away with saying, no, trans women and men, balls and men's, things like this, the first person to get away with that is going to start a chain reaction in other people who are like, well, actually, if I wanted to believe the evidence of my own eyes, then yeah, I'm going to call that a man, etc., etc. There is always hope. These things can always be changed. They can always be fought back, and we have to do that. Essentially, it's cometh the hour, cometh the man. We have got to make ourselves into the people who will be capable of resisting this. And that actually means doing a lot of heavy moral thought and a little heavy sort of sweat of mind. Why do I believe what I believe? Why is this good? Getting down to the very most basic thing. So essentially, there are no further questions to ask. And then what we should be doing. And that's another difficult thing to do, because essentially you're going to have to choose the moral origin point that you think is a good place to start with, and that you feel that you can justify. And then from that, you derive your maxims that are your duties. You say, right, what should I do? Right. So like, for example, I was nearly late for this because I had to go into town, and I didn't drive or get a taxi or anything. I rode my bike because I should ride my bike. It's good for my fitness.
Of course you should.
It was miserable weather, but the point is, I'm taking the sort of I'm very big on Aristotle at the moment. I think Aristotelian virtue ethics, I think, are exactly what the atheistic young men need, because they're totally secular, totally action oriented, totally self-justifying and holistic. They bring a full picture of a person together, and they don't leave young men like wondering for what they should be doing in social relations and stuff like that.
So tell us on that note, which of Aristotle's passages, poems, books?
Well, the Nicomachean Ethics is the book that we'd be talking about. But you probably don't want to just read it, because what it is a collection of his notes from his students. There are two books that are two different collections, essentially kind of like the Bible. We've got 4 books of the Bible that are copies of each other, with his students walking around behind him taking notes as he wanders around the garden and pontificates about whatever substance. So it's not really in very good order. It could be rewritten to be more streamlined. But you can quite easily find Aristotle's virtue ethics explained on some philosophy channel on YouTube, and it's I think the great way that he frames things is that essentially what you're looking to do are things that are considered wholesome, and what's wholesome is that which produces good condition. So you see the athlete running around the track, you see that the running produced the healthy condition of the athlete, the perfect form of the athlete. And so that you do
back to basics.
Yeah, it's totally is. But the excellence comes from habit, right? So it's not from any one individual act. Excellence does not come. It's from repetition of the act. So every day you do that wholesome thing that produces good condition, and then in a year's time or 6 months or however long it takes, people will look at you and see the good condition. That's the virtue. They'll be able to see it in you. And this, and so to become Aristotle, but that only makes you a continent man. That's still not you're not enough to be a virtuous man yet, because he's got 4 grades of the levels of men basically, and the vicious man is at the bottom, the man who enjoys evil, which obviously we're not. Then you're the incontinent man, the man who knows he should do good but can't really control himself. And then you've got the continent man, which is the man who might still enjoy doing things that are, enjoy indulging vices, but controls himself because he knows he shouldn't. But the virtuous man is the man who does the right thing because he enjoys doing the right thing, for the love of the right thing. And that's difficult to attain. It's something you've got to really train yourself on, but it's a process of years. And I'm doing it with my bike. I'm starting to enjoy it as well, because I can really, I'm trying to get there, because it's a goal that you personally set for yourself. It's individualistic. It's secular. It doesn't care about God or anything like that. You know, like a virtuous Muslim, you know, an Aristotelian Muslim would go to the mosque every day, pray 5 times a day. You know, they would do the behavior that made them a virtuous Muslim. And so this is the sort of framework that I'm preaching, I guess you could say, for want of a better word, to this sort of young men who are watching me, saying, look, you know, this essentially is bootstraps. You know, no one's going to give you a fucking break. If you're a young white man, you're fucked. You know, I mean, it was bad enough when I was at school. You know, it was quite liberal, so it was no, like, it wasn't racial hierarchies or anything like that when I was at school, like 20, 30 years, 25 years ago. But you know, you didn't get any. You couldn't get any leg up or anything. I just got told, no, shit, do it again. And so I'm basically telling them, look, just don't think you can get away with shirking. There's no such thing. There's virtue or vice, and you've got to make your choice. And one produces a wholesome result and one doesn't. So get used to it. You deal with it. It's a harsh reality of life. You're never going to get a handout. Get off your ass and get building something. You know, we've got to be the kind of people.
If you will. Just one more topic, if you've got the time, and that's the feminism. And Milo Yiannopoulos made his classic statement that got him into a lot of trouble a couple of years ago, saying, you know, feminism is worse than cancer. You remember that? He took a lot of heat for that.
He's completely.
He's completely and I
completely correct. Yeah.
I went through all of his. He's right. Can you tell the audience about what's gone wrong with feminism? Because feminism in its day, 60s, 70s, was, you know, positive movement. It's now gone off the level.
So, I mean, you don't have to go back that far to see feminism as a positive movement. The 90s, feminism, I probably would have called myself a feminist if someone had asked me, because there are lots of different movements that have gone under the name of feminism that aren't really feminist that we recognize today. I guess the way we can look at it is, from where are they drawing their moral authority, right? And so if you say in the sort of 90s sort of style feminism, you draw your moral authority from an individual's liberty and an individual's ability to, you know, bodily integrity, be in command of themselves, and, you know, free action, free association, all these sort of traditionally liberal values, then that kind of feminism's wholesome. You know, that's good. Of course, you know, women should be free people to make their own decisions in life. Obviously, you know, no one disagrees with this, but that doesn't pathologize men as the problem. That just looks at the individual woman and says, well, she's not able to do something that she should be entitled to do, or is having something happen to her that shouldn't be happening to her, and therefore, you know, action can be taken. But that's not to say that all men are evil. However, modern feminism has been conquered very, very swiftly by Marxism. The liberal aspect of feminism was easily supplanted by what is now called intersectionality. This is exactly the same as the way that Karl Marx writes in the Communist Manifesto. It is materialistic, it is dialectical, and it believes that all through history there has been a ruling class of humans, which have been the men, and a subservient serf class of humans, which were the women. And therefore, all of human history can be viewed as men oppressing women, even when they're dying for them and things like this. You know, they're still part of the oppressor class. And this dichotomy can be applied to any other identitarian group. So you have whites and blacks, you have straights and gays, you have trans and cis, you have anything that can be judged to be an unequal power imbalance. Because, and this is why identity politics are so nefarious. Every single individual becomes a unit of political power. And that's kind of scary, because then you're fighting a race war, and you're always fighting a race war. And no matter what field you're on, any example of a white man or, you know, a woman, if you're you know, the other way or whatever it is, that is an enemy unit, an enemy combatant. So you should be deplatforming those white men from your, and there has been examples of CEOs and stuff stepping down saying, well, I'm white, I should be letting people of color take positions. Well, okay, well, fine, bye, you know.
Yeah.
You know, but you earned that, you know. Like, but that's the point. It turns everything to a race war or a gender war, and this is ruining the society that we're in. I mean, I think you could lay a huge amount of the social pathologies that we have at the feet of feminism at this point. The destruction of the nuclear family, as if this isn't, because the nuclear family is a construct of patriarchy, obviously, because everything that wasn't constructed in a feminist way is a patriarchal construct.
Right.
In the same way everything that was constructed by a white person is white supremacy. So the feminist attack on the nuclear family, attack on heterosexuality, and the generally declining birth rates of people when they become wealthy and fat and happy, I think is actually going to, there's a demographic winter coming that is actually going to be really terrifying. There will be huge demographic shifts in the West in about 50 years, something like that. Don't know what's going to happen. It's not going to be pretty. I'm sure you guys probably
You
got some
mean
experience there.
we're not having children anymore?
Yes, but the people that we have invited in are having children. There's no getting around the fact that these numbers exist and they are going to matter in 30, 40, 50 years time. You know, it's yeah. I mean, you know, people can vote in anything really, you know. So I don't know why they've done this to us, but that's something else to think about. But
I think technology may save us. I really do.
I think technology might be a thing that kills us.
Possibly.
I think I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think there's a necessary part of a human being that needs hardship, and without that hardship, it's not really a proper human being. And you can see this in the sort of Californian Zoomers who have always had social media and can't take any kind of criticism. They can't take any kind of like challenge to their worldview. They've always been weighted upon hand and foot by the authorities, by their parents, you know, and they become absolutely insufferable people, the sort of people who you just don't want to be around. And this is going to be the end of civilization. That's the end state of the communist utopia, because deprivation is necessary for a human being to develop character. You have to go through some hardship. You have to go without to know what it's like to go without.
Yeah,
to know,
survival.
To know, but more importantly, to show you that you are not the center of the fucking universe. Check your fucking ego is essentially what that is. You know, like I was too proud to ask my parents for money when I was in university, and so I had a few hungry nights, but these were very, very instructive. You know, this very motivational. Made me very grateful when my friends would help out or something like this. You know, it's what creates bonds of loyalty between people. It creates friendships. It shows people when someone helps you through hardship, then you become friends with them, and you have an affection for them. In the world that they're trying to create, no one's going to need anyone for anything. And then when you think about it, all of our bonds of relationships are built on necessity. You know, I need my wife to, you know, I need a partner to love because I have this desire. But if I've been essentially trained that all of the people can just be disposed of just with a block, you know, and maybe I can get a sex robot or something, you know, who knows what technology can do, then why would humans bother with each other at all if no other human is necessary in your life?
Funny you mentioned sex robots, but my wife and I were going to go to Japan last year, and we listed all the crazy things we wanted to do. And on the list was have sex with sex robots. and she said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. You're going to get jealous and beat up my one.
Well, I agree. I would do the same.
I mean, come on, you know, what do you expect?
You know. So basically, I think we're looking at a future that actually kind of seems a bit inevitable. It's probably wishful thinking to think that we're going to be able to roll back leftism, but we have to try, even if we fail. I think we're duty bound to try, even if we fail. It doesn't matter how bad it gets. We've got to do it. And I think that people understand that when you put yourself on the line for something that might otherwise seem confusing, why is this? When you start actually suffering for it, I think, you know, people understand that there is something here, and they'll start listening eventually. But I don't think it's inevitable. I think that us becoming technologically dependent and isolated probably is inevitable. I think that eventually governments will probably have to ban social media.
So you'll be happy to hear I'm not on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook at all.
That's wise.
You know, I just use WhatsApp.
Yeah. My kids
Carl,
are angry.
I cannot thank you enough. I really cannot thank you enough.
My kids are furious that I won't let them on social media.
Do they not sneak onto it?
Nope, don't learn. Don't learn. My 10-year-old is desperate for all of her friends have phones, for Facebook. And no, she's not having it. My wife was like, "Oh, go on, can't we get one?" I was like, "No, Bill Gates doesn't let his kids have one. Tim Cook from Apple doesn't let his kids have one."
Really?
No, God no, none of them have social media. None of them are allowed on it. And you think, well, there we go. If it's not good enough for those people, it's certainly not good enough for me. You know? Exactly. And there have been lots of studies that show it completely deforms your brain. It changes the way that you take information in. It changes like your dopamine patterns and things like this. Politically, it is what's driving the factionalization of society. You only hear facts from one side of the argument, and you don't hear the other side. And then the other side gets deplatformed because those facts are racist. So
on that note, you know, you really are a flag bearer for the good guys. You really are, and I want to thank you on behalf of all the friends that I know for flying the flag. And one of the greatest credits to you was that when you got deplatformed, Jordan Peterson, Milo Yiannopoulos, Dave Rubin,
Sam Harris
stepped off at the same time, which says a hell of a lot about you, Carl.
Thank you.
Please keep flying the flag, and if there's any way we can help, let us know. Subscribe to your channel.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the way things, I'm not normally the sort of guy to say this, but fund the things you like, because otherwise they're going to go away, because we're all being demonetized. Like in the past 3 months, I've been through 3 different t-shirt manufacturers. I mean, my YouTube channel's been demonetized and kicked off Patreon, but I've got Subscribestar. But there is just a low level ongoing effort to deplatform those opponents of political correctness. So at some point, Steven Crowder will put out a t-shirt that, oh, we can get rid of him for this. This was good enough for us to kick him off. I wasn't even given reasons for why I was kicked off, because none of the t-shirts I had were particularly offensive or anything. Nothing hate speech or anything. But it was just, we've seen what happens. Let's just not.
So how do you make money? Tell us quickly. So there are a lot of wealthy people on this.
Donations from my viewers and merch sales when we've got thankfully merch t-shirt producing stores online are a dime a dozen, so we can keep going between them and find one that just doesn't care, that's probably based in Russia or something, but that's how, because they've
and sponsors.
I personally don't do sponsors,
okay.
But that's because I grew up in the 90s, and that's considered selling out. You don't want to sell out,
and it's a little tacky.
It is.
When Ben Shapiro says, and this, it's like, it's a bit creepy.
Ben takes me through his morning shaving routine, and then I brush my teeth for this, and I get off of my sponsored bed and use my sponsored toothbrush, and then shave on my sponsored shaving.
He's very good at that.
Oh yeah, it's like second nature to him, but that's an American thing, I think.
Yes, it is.
I can't do it. I've never done a sponsorship for a company, and God willing, I'll never have to. I hate it.
Yeah. Carl, we'd love to invite you to South Africa. We're the longest in lockdown, longest country in lockdown. We're 122 days, and we're still in lockdown 3, being micromanaged by guys that have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah,
and it's a sad situation. But come and visit the place. Come and visit us.
I
we'll have a lot of friends here.
And I'll get Callum and Johnny to let you know if I can come. Basically, I can't do anything until the lockdowns are over. But when they're all over, maybe eventually, I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to. Thank you so much for having me. I know I've rabbited like 1,000.
Not at all.
There's a lot to unpack, and it's complex stuff.
And let us know if we can help you in any way. There's some very interesting, dynamic people.
Thank you.
Stay in touch. Thank you, Carl.